When I opened my eyes, I was inside a novel. The Birth of a Hero was a novel focused on the adventures of the main character, Choi Han, a high school boy who was transported to a different dimension from Earth. Along with the birth of the numerous heroes of the continent, I became a part of that novel as the trash of the Count's family. The family that oversaw the territory where the first village that Choi Han visits is located. The problem is that Choi Han becomes twisted after that village, and everyone in it is destroyed by assassins. The bigger problem is the fact that this stupid trash who I've become doesn't know about what happened in the village and messes with Choi Han, only to get beaten to a pulp. This is going to be a headache. I feel like something serious has happened to me. But it was worth trying to make this my new life. The man could feel someone gently tapping his body. The rough hand made the man think of the hands of an exhausted parent. It was that warm. Young master, it is morning. But the voice was very profound. The man felt chills throughout his body and his eyes subconsciously opened, rather than the bright sunlight coming in through the window to warm the man's eyes. What he saw was an old man standing there with a satisfied expression. It is surprising to see you wake up after a single attempt. Huh? The master wishes to dine with the young master since it has been a while. It looks like it will be possible today. The man could see a mirror past the old man's shoulder. Inside the mirror was a red-haired man who seemed to be confused looking back at him. I guess that guy is me. Young Master Kale? The man turned toward the source of the worried voice to find the old man, who looked like a servant, looking toward him. But that concerned man was not the problem. The man clearly heard it. Young Master Kale. It was a familiar name. He slowly blurted out the name. Kale Hanatus? The old servant was looking at him like he was looking at his own grandson. Yes, that is your name, young master. I'm guessing you are still a bit drunk. Listening to the concerned response of the old man, the man naturally thought about a name that was even more important than the name Kale Hanatus. Peacrocks. Are you talking about my son? Chef. Yes, my son is the chef. Do you need him to make something for your hangover? The man felt his surroundings turn dark and he started to feel dizzy. He lowered his head and put it into his hand. Young master, are you still drunk? Should I call the doctor? Or will you wash right now? The man looked at the red hair that was falling in front of his face. It was a bright red color, much too different from his original black hair. Kale Hanatus, Peacrocks, Peacrocks' dad, Ron. They were the characters that appeared at the beginning of The Birth of a Hero, the novel the man was reading before he fell asleep last night. He jerked his head up and looked around. He could see the bedroom that was completely different from a typical Korean design. It made the man think about Europe. Every single thing in the room was extremely extravagant and luxurious. Young master? The man responded to Ron, the old man who was pretending to be concerned and worried. Cold water. Excuse me? He needed something to clear his mind. He could see the face of Kale Hanatus in the mirror behind old man Ron. Still looks normal. I guess Kale hasn't been beaten to a pulp by the main character just yet. Single quote. His handsome face caught his attention. The man had become Kale Hanatus when he opened his eyes. Kale Hanatus, the trash who was beaten to a pulp by the main character in the beginning of The Birth of a Hero. That was who he was. Young master, I presume you will not be bathing in cold water. Are you asking for drinking water? Kale turned his gaze toward Ron. Ron may be pretending to be a benign old man, but he was actually hiding his true identity as a cruel and vicious individual. He made the request to Ron. Please get me some drinking water. He needed to drink some cold water and clear his mind first. I will prepare it right away. Great, thanks. Ron flinched for a second and had an odd expression on his face. But Kale did not notice it. Ron had to leave the bedroom as there was only warm water in the room. Once he was left alone, Kale got off the bed and headed to the bathroom. If he really was inside of the novel, he knew that there should be a large mirror inside. As expected, the full body mirror was inside the bathroom. Kale Hanatus, who had a lot of interest in his appearance and physique, had this mirror set up in here. Nobody else in the household had such a mirror. The man in the mirror had red hair and a pretty fit body. It wouldn't be wrong to say he had a body that would make any style look good. I really am Kale. The man in the mirror indeed was Kale from the novel. The Birth of a Hero was very descriptive about each of the characters' appearance. That was why the man had no choice but to agree that he had indeed turned into Kale. Do people usually become calmer when they are surprised and shocked? Kale. No. Kim Rok-soo calmly thought about the night before. It was a typical day off. It had been a while since he had read an actual book instead of on his phone. So he went to the library to check out some books. He borrowed the entire series since he planned to read all day long. The name of that book was, of course, The Birth of a Hero. He managed to finish the 5th volume before he fell asleep. But when he woke up, he had turned into Kale, the individual that the main character mercilessly beat up in Volume 1. Will things go the way they did in the novel? He felt unnaturally calm. Once he got past the point of shock, his mind had calmed back down. He started to remember the contents of Volume 1. The Birth of a Hero. This novel was about the birth of the heroes in the Western and Eastern continents, as well as their trials and growth. The main character was, naturally, Korean. He was a student who had been transported into the world when he was a freshman in high school. Furthermore, his lifespan became as long as a dragon's lifespan, making him pretty much never age. This is bad? He was going to be beaten into a pulp by such a person. The important thing, however, was that he had not been beaten up just yet. Kale took his eyes off the mirror and walked into the tub that was full of warm water. He leaned against the tub and looked up at the ceiling. It was that expensive marble that was described in the novel. The estate that Kale lived in was actually full of marble. Kale started to mumble as he looked toward the ceiling. It's not like there's much I'll miss. His life as Kim Rok-soo. There really wasn't much to it. He was an orphan and didn't have much money. He also didn't have a person he loved to death, nor a friend he would give his life to save. He only continued to live because he could not die. Yes, he could not die. He completely hated the thought of death or pain. He became an orphan after both of his parents passed away from a car accident when he was little. He didn't like pain or death, no matter what it was. Even if he was rolling in a pile of dog shit, it was still better than being dead. For that reason, I need to first make sure I don't get beaten up. Kale did not know what day it was in the novel right now, but he was sure that he had not met with the main character just yet. The reason was simple. I don't have the scar on my side. Kale, the trash of Count Hennetus's family. A few days before meeting the main character, Kale was drinking and causing a ruckus. He was flinging things around and got stabbed on his side by a broken desk leg, resulting in the scar. What an interesting character. He didn't get the scar from fighting someone else. He got it because he got angry that the alcohol didn't taste good and threw a tantrum. He meets the main character a few times after he gets the scar, and, in a refreshing cider-like scene, gets beat into a pulp. Kale crossed his arms and started to think. He did not know what happened to Kale after getting beat into a pulp in Volume 1. All he knew was that the main character, Choi Han, has many fateful encounters and overcomes a lot of trials to grow into a hero along with his party members. Thus the era for him to prove that he is a hero will begin. The Roan kingdom that Kale currently lives in, as well as many other locations in the eastern and western continents, will be filled with war. It truly will turn into the time for the heroes to show their full potential. Kale started to frown. Kim Rok-soo, the man who became Kale. His life motto was pretty simple. Living long without pain. Enjoying the small joys of life. Living a peaceful life. As long as I make the story proceed like normal while taking out the fact that I get beaten up, the main character will take care of the rest. For some odd reason, he could recall every single line in the book without any issue. Kale relaxed in the warm water while coming to a final conclusion with his now clear head. It's worth trying. It was worth trying to avoid the continent's war and living peacefully. This trash's situation was much better than when he was Kim Rok-soo. The location of this estate was also in the corner of the western continent, making it an ideal location to avoid the war. In the novel itself, there were many nobles who managed to avoid the influences of war. Even if he could not completely avoid it, he should be able to at least reduce the damages to a minimum. Young master, Are you inside the bathroom? He could hear Ron's voice coming from outside. Kale thought about Ron's true identity. Ron was an assassin who crossed over from the eastern continent by sea. He pretended to be a benign old man. But the true Ron was a cruel and merciless man. Yes, I'll be right out. His natural response was to talk informally to the old man. Kale realized what he was doing and made up his mind about what to do in the future. He needed to push that old man to the main character and send him away. That old man could easily kill Kale with a single blow, but treated Kale like a puppy you left alone because you felt bad for it. He was smiling gently, but there was not an ounce of care about Kale on the inside. In the novel, Ron leaves with the main character and his son after Choi Han beats Kale to a pulp. Kale put the bathrobe on as he quickly exited the bathroom. Ron was standing there with a smile on his face and a tray with a cup in his hands. Young master, here you go. Kale picked up the cup and walked past the old man. He did not want to make eye contact with such a dangerous old man. Great, thanks. Ron's expression turned odd once again. But Kale had already walked past him. Kale took a drink of the cold water as he started to think. There are too many strong people here. In fact, there were too many of them. No matter where the main character went, there were either strong individuals or individuals with hidden secrets. These individuals were both human and other races. I at least need the strength to protect myself. In order to live long without pain in the continent that will soon be filled with war. You needed a decent level of strength. Of course, you could not be too strong. Then other complicated things will happen. Kale thought about the different fateful encounters that occurred in the beginning parts of the novel. The powers that strengthen the main character and his party members. He was thinking about the ones that would help him live long without pain. There were a couple that came to mind. He just needed to pick one of them. Young master, we will start to dress you now. Oh, right, thanks. The doors soon opened and couple servants entered to help Ron dress Kale. Kale did not notice that Ron had a stoic expression unlike his usual self as he looked at the clothes the servants were bringing in. Ah, something simple today. He hated really complicated attires. Simple clothes that let you relax comfortably were the best. Yes, young master. The servant in charge of the attires quickly pulled out some simple clothes and Kale changed into the simplest of them all. He lightly frowned after finishing getting dressed. Even this simple attire was extremely extravagant and not to his liking. However, the reflection in the mirror was quite handsome. He really is handsome and makes any clothes look good. The face really was the final piece to fashion. He looked in the mirror and fixed his sleeves before turning around to look at Ron. Ron was once again smiling like a gentle old man. Ron, let's go. Yes, young master. Kale walked behind Ron. It was nice that he did not need to know the layout of the estate. He just needed to follow Ron wherever he needed to go. All of the servants that Kale saw flinched and bowed respectfully before they seemed to run away. Why are they so scared? Kale never hit people. He just liked to drink and play. Sometimes, when he was drunk, he did break things, but that was why he was the trash of the family. He also did not treat people like people, other than the few people he liked. Well, it's better if nobody talks to me. Kale thought about it peacefully. It would be more difficult if he was in the body of a model citizen. A trash can do as he pleases without worry. It was only possible because there was no desire to live as a model citizen. I will now open the door. Sure. Kale nodded his head toward Ron. The book mentioned that Kale treated Ron, someone who raised him like he was his own grandson since he was little, as nicely as he treated his own father. It mentioned that he always responded to Ron and treated him like a person. Of course, Ron did not really think that way. That was why it was easy for Kale to talk to Ron. He just needed to answer Ron's questions and treat him like a human being. I hope you enjoy your breakfast. Thanks, Ron. Make sure you eat a good meal too. Kale walked past Ron and into the dining room. He could see his family sitting there. His father and the current head of the Henitus household, Duruth. Next to him was Kale's stepmother, the Countess, as well as her son and daughter. The four people looked toward Kale. You are late again. Today. Kale's gaze turned toward his father who spoke. The birth of a hero, described Kale's feelings for his father like this. His father was the one person that Kale listened to. The reason the trash did not leave the area and got everything he wanted inside the Count's territory was because of his father, Count Daruth Henitus. But, unfortunately, Kale's father was unlike the other strong fathers in this novel. He did not have any special skills or influence. He just had a lot of money. However, Kale liked this a lot. It was the perfect family environment to live a simple life. Then there were the other three individuals. His stepmother, who knew that he did not like her and avoided him. Her smart firstborn, who found it difficult to deal with his much older brother Kale. And the cute youngest of the family, who avoided her older brother Kale. But it wasn't like Kale bothered them or they bothered Kale. They just treated each other like strangers. Kale thought this was such a great environment to quietly live alone. Take a seat. Yes, father. Kale looked at the feast on the table that did not meet his definition of breakfast and sat down on his seat. He then felt something was odd and lifted his head up. Is there something you need to say, father? I do not. Daruth was staring at Kale. The rest of the family was doing the same. Kale made eye contact with each of these family members. They all quickly turned away whenever he made eye contact and continued to eat. I guess they find me really difficult to handle. Kale turned his head toward the table as well. This luxurious feast that was different than the breakfast he used to eat just to fill his belly made him start to smile. He first started by cutting the sausage in half with the knife. It is so juicy. He didn't know if juice flowed out as soon as he cut into it because it was handmade or because it was cooked well. But the color on the sausage made him hungry. Kale started to smile without realizing it. Clang! He heard something fall down and made eye contact with his younger brother Basin. He could see that Basin had dropped the fork in his hand. My apologies. Basin calmly apologized like the personality described for him in the novel. The servant in charge of the meal quickly came over to hand Basin a new fork and picked up the fork on the floor. Watching that made Kale think that it was nice to be a noble. Before he focused once again on the food in front of him. Kale had found the first good thing about coming into the novel. This breakfast was extremely luxurious and so tasty that his stomach was completely happy. The smile on his face could not disappear. Ho? That was why he did not hear his brother Basin's shocked proclamation. Kale looked around at all of the dishes in front of him. He then moved his fork towards a salad made of fruits that he did not recognize. After filling his stomach with meat, soup, and bread, he wanted to try something new. The fruit looked like an orange, but the color was closer to that of grapes. Kale put the fruit in his mouth and took a bite. In that instant, sweet fruit juice filled his mouth. He really hated sour fruits. So this extremely sweet flavor in his mouth made him subconsciously start to drool. At that moment, he made eye contact with his father Daruth, who was looking at him. Kale. Daruth quietly called Kale's name before hesitating. He then started to frown and move his mouth. Kale did not like that awkward atmosphere and started to speak. It's delicious. Yes. It tastes like trash, huh? Did you say it is delicious? Yes. Everything tastes wonderful. Kale picked up a different fruit this time and smiled after tasting the sweetness in his mouth once again. The trash. Kale Henitus never cared for etiquette anyways. He probably shouldn't do this while speaking with his father, the head of the household. But whatever. He's just trash in the first place. It really is best to be the trash. Nobody really cared no matter what he did. As long as he can prevent himself from getting beaten up by the main character. It will be a good life. As Kale expected, nobody criticized his lack of manners. In fact, Daruth actually had a smile on his face as he started to nod his head. Yes. It really is delicious. It is nice to see you enjoying food so much. Daruth really seemed like the only person who cared for Kale. He didn't even seem to care about Kale's lack of manners. Well, a truly caring father should probably try to fix this personality of Kale. But this Kale did not care as he was not the real Kale Henitus. Yes. Please make sure you eat a lot as well. Father. Basin let out another ho, and Kale, who heard it this time, turned his gaze back to the dishes. The 15-year-old Basin, the 3 years younger brother of the Kale that he possessed, was difficult to handle. Unlike the trash Kale, Basin was smart, sincere, and very responsible. The people of the family were pushing for Basin to be the next head of household. Kim Rok-soo agreed with this sentiment even after turning into Kale. Rather than having a complicated life being in charge of this territory, I'd rather use my position as the count's older brother to laze around and live peacefully in a section of the territory. Kale did not try to argue with Basin. He could hear Basin's gasp of shock and knew that Basin was looking down on him. But what could he do about it? Once Basin becomes the head of the household, his personality was one that he would probably not kill Kale. But in order to not get hurt and quietly move to a small village, he needed to not get on Basin's nerves. If that's not possible, I'll just make some money beforehand and go somewhere that the war will not reach. Kale pretended not to hear Basin's gasp and continued to eat. Once the meal was over, his father, Jaruth, was the first to get up. He seemed to have been satisfied with breakfast, as his face was filled with a smile. It really was delicious. If breakfast was like this every day, Kale would probably give up some sleep to come eat breakfast all the time. Jaruth looked around at the family members who got up after he did, before resting his gaze on his firstborn son. Kale, is there anything you need? Kale was confused at Jaruth's sudden gesture, but he decided to honestly answer. Please give me some money. Sure, I'll give you a lot. Jaruth answered without any hesitation. This really was a well-off family, as a territory that mined for marble and grew grapes for wine. They were overflowing with money right now. Great. Please give me as much as you can. Kale could feel his two younger siblings looking at him, but there was no need for him to be embarrassed. Wasn't it better to ask for money instead of drinking and causing a ruckus? Furthermore, he needed money to proceed with his plans. That fateful encounter to get himself a strong enough power to keep himself safe. He needed some money in order to cause that fateful encounter to happen. Sure, I'll give you as much as I can. Kale started to smile after being satisfied with his father's response. However, he was at a loss of words after returning to his chamber and receiving the check from the deputy butler, Hans. The check that was issued through a partnership with the Treasury Department and the Magic Department made Kale's heart run wild. So much money? This family didn't seem to only have a bit of money. In fact, they seemed to have a lot of money. The novel did mention that Kale received a large allowance, but it did not mention the exact amount. However, he could realistically understand how large it was based on the amount listed on the check. 10 million gallon. It is about equivalent to 10 million Korean won. If it is like this, Kale could change his plans. Kale's brain started to quickly think about his options. I'll be heading out now. Young master. The deputy butler delivered the check and bid goodbye. But Kale did not respond. Deputy butler Hans just treated this as normal and headed toward the door. However, he soon stopped moving. It was because Kale had gotten up from his seat and said something to Ron. Ron, let's go to the study. Hans then became anxious at Kale's words. Ron was the same. Did you say the study? Kale found this odd. This sly old man's voice was shaking a bit. Was there a reason he could not go to the study? Yes. He needed to go to the study to form his plan. There were no desks or even any paper in his chamber. There were a lot of expensive-looking alcohol bottles though. Excuse me, young master. What is it? Kale looked toward the anxious-looking deputy butler. We have not been able to do our morning cleaning of the study just yet. Is that so? It's fine if it goes a day without cleaning. No sir, we cannot let that happen. The deputy butler was extremely pushy about this for some reason. He then smiled brightly and put up a single finger. Please just wait 1 hour. I will put my name on the line to make sure that the study is completely clean. Not like a study that has not been used in 10 years. But one that was used just yesterday. Sure, whatever. He didn't mind waiting an hour. Great. Then I will go report this to the master. No need to do that. But go ahead if you want to do so. Yes, young master. I will be off now. Okay, sure. Like a well-trained deputy butler, Hans closed the door without making any noise and disappeared. He seemed to be in a rush. Kale knew that there were 3 deputy butlers vying to become the official butler. Maybe that was why Hans was so passionate about it. Ron, young master? Why are you blanking out like that? My apologies, young master. No need to apologize. Ron had another odd expression on his face. But Kale put the precious check in his inner pocket as he asked. There was so much going on that he did not even have any time to ask about today's date. What is today's date? This question would seem odd coming from anybody else. But the servant Ron answered in a gentle voice. It is the 29th day of the 3rd month in the 781st year of the Felix calendar. That is a problem. Excuse me? Nothing. Kale tightly clenched on the 10 million gallon in his pocket once more. The only thing he could trust was money. Yesterday, the 28th day of the 3rd month in the 781st year of the Felix calendar. That was the day that the villagers of Harris Village, the village that the main character Choi Han went to after escaping from the Forest of Darkness. The place that Choi Han felt human affection for the first time in this world. Made friends, and created a second family. Were all murdered by an unknown group of assassins. Even Kale, who had read until the 5th volume, did not know the true identity of this secret organization that murdered the villagers. Some readers may be saying something like this while reading about this situation. I thought he was really strong. What was Choi Han doing while they were murdered? It is only natural to think like that. However, there is a reason this novel is called The Birth of a Hero, and not The Strength of the Hero, or The War of the Heroes. Birth. It was the story of a person who overcame all sorts of obstacles and carried the pains of his past as he became a hero. Love and friendship comes up along the way as he meets enemies and friends. Something that cannot be missing from a story is the awakening. He may have explosive talents and have lived for tens of years in the Forest of Darkness. But, through all of that, Choi Han was still an innocent and gentle person who could not kill another human being. He had no issues killing monsters. But Choi Han had never hurt another person. In order to turn someone like him into a hero, the novel had created a situation for Choi Han. In order to heal the lady who treated him like her own son, Choi Han had gone into the Forest of Darkness to find some precious medicinal herbs. He had to travel deep into the forest to find it. And when he finally managed to find the herb and headed back towards the village, he found the corpses of the murdered villagers, the burning houses, and the assassins who were about to leave. Choi Han went berserk after seeing this and killed someone for the first time. Of course, the people he killed are the members of this secret organization. And this secret organization clashes against Choi Han every so often throughout the novel. Choi Han only returns to normal after killing all of the assassins from the secret organization, before falling into a state of despair as he is unable to gather any information from the dead bodies. He then buries the bodies of the villagers before making a promise to himself. I will kill them all. I will kill all of the people that made this happen. Choi Han realized what the sadness of death was at this moment. But his first kill starts to twist his mind. Of course, he starts to feel again and starts to become more human-like after meeting his party members later in the novel. And grows to become a true hero. Ron. Yes. Young master. A cup of cold water please. I understand. After Ron left and he was alone in the room, Kale covered his face with both of his hands. The problem was that the city that this twisted Choi Han arrives at after leaving Harris Village is the city called Western. Located in the center of the Hennetus territory. Kale, who happens to run into Choi Han, annoys Choi Han and ends up getting beaten up. That is when Choi Han gets his first subject, party member. The reliable chef Beecrox. I was going to head there in advance and help him out. The best scenario to not get beaten up is no longer available. I did care more about potentially saving the people of the village. But there is nothing I can do about it at this point. Now, all that is left is to make sure I act in a way to avoid getting beaten up by the angry Choi Han, who is moving at a crazy speed to arrive at Western City by tomorrow. Avoiding the main character is not a good idea. He needed to run into Choi Han so that Ron and Beecrox run into him as well. That was the only way for the three of them to leave this place together to start their official journey. Then that left just one course of action. Have them run into each other and then get out of their way. With the best possible first impression. If possible. Young master. Ah, thanks, Ron. Kale took a sip from the cup that Ron brought over. He then started to frown. It's not cold water? It is lemonade. He really is an insidious man. He knows that. Just like Kim Rok-soo. The original Kale hates sour things. But he still chose to bring lemonade, which would take more work to prepare than cold water. Kale wanted to be angry at the sour taste. But he could not do so because he was afraid of that assassin old man. He could only drink the lemonade. Thanks. It was wonderful. No problem. Young master. We should be able to head to the study soon. Great. Ron's benign and gentle smile caused Kale to have the chills. He once again clenched onto the 10 million gallon check for support. Money really was the only thing you could trust.